Well, welcome back to Watching Privacy Show with Brent and Raju. It's been quite some time, but good to see you all again. I think we got a special one today because Brent has been doing some homework on his end, and I think he's got his report for us. What do you got, Brent?
Well, Sheriff, since you got the star on your shirt there, I love that. By the way, I broke out a brand new Rams hat just for you, Tejas. But no, I'm really excited. We have been working on doing a little AI and data privacy research and study and trying to find out how people kind of view AI, how they're using it, and how they view data privacy, and if there's some kind of impact that their usage of AI has had on their thoughts around data privacy. So we thought we'd spend this episode of Watching Privacy kind of digging in a little bit to the results and getting some of each of our perspective, but also we got a few other experts that we're going to bring in during the course of the show. Actually, one is in the green room right now. He's so eager. He's already here, Mr. John Reed. I like to call him the Bro Hammer, but he's John Reed, the co-founder of Diginomica. So, and we're going to have Andrew David. I don't want to mess his name up, his last name, but he'll join us as well. He's a privacy expert. And so we're going to dig in a little bit and get some outside perspectives. And hopefully, anybody who's out there taking this in, we would love to actually get your feedback, your comments, and any questions you may have as we go through some of these things. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up kind of what the next 45, 50 minutes or so are going to look like. So what we're going to cover is basically why we did this, why we did the survey, why was it something we wanted to kind of dig into, and who participated in the survey, get some of the key findings, get some of our perspective on it. Like I said, add some additional perspective from Andrew and John Reed. And hopefully anybody out there who is interested and has some comments or some questions, feel free to load us up because we would love to take those in as well. Fellas, does that sound like a kind of a good roadmap to kind of go with?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So I think the easiest one is why we did it. We actually, I think around the 2020 timeframe, we did our kind of the first collaborative data privacy study, and found some interesting results, but something happened in between 2020 and where we are now that's kind of shaped everything and changed everything. It's this thing called generative AI. I don't know if you've heard of it or if anybody has talked to you about it, but it has definitely changed the landscape for pretty much everything when it comes to technology, particularly in the enterprise. And so what we thought it would be great to do at this point in time is to kind of just look at how folks are using AI and generative AI and how companies are using it from like a data training perspective. See, how they're using it and what their thoughts and experience have been. And then also to see how those experiences has changed, if at all, the way that they view data privacy. And so I think, does that kind of sum everything up while we're looking at doing this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, depending on who you talk to, how plugged into the industry they are, how much of a techie they are, you get really wildly different answers on how important privacy is, how much generative AI actually impacts their day-to-day life. And so having like a broader survey that'll kind of hopefully normalize some of these answers. We might have strong feelings one way or the other towards a certain topic, but the vast majority could feel extremely different. So it'd be interesting to see what these results are.
All right. So and so going into actually who participated. So this first go around, and we foresee this as being just the first go around. We want to kind of on a timely basis see how these answers change over time. So we started out with 1,000 U.S. based employees. Eventually, we'll hope to go international, so to speak, and find out how folks in one geographic location answer these questions based compared to what's going to see here in the U.S. So eventually we'll get to that, but we wanted to start with U.S. based employees. There's 1,000, and then the actual breakdown in terms of they're pretty much all over the board in terms of the size of the companies that they work at. So we wanted to have like a kind of a nice wide swath of that. Although you could see a pretty significant portion, even at the high end. I think we have about 28% of folks that took it coming from 1,000 employee companies and up. And then on almost sort of like the same kind of number for under 100. And then there's a really big chunk of people that work between 100 and 1,000 employees. So kind of covers a lot of ground just from that perspective. And they also work at although a big chunk works at B2C, still a significant portion works. Their primary business model is around B2B, and there's some government in there. So once again, we kind of get a nice broad perspective from that kind of vantage point. They worked in all the different areas within the business, although I think IT and operations actually were pretty well represented. But you could see lots of people in marketing and sales and customer service across the board. So we're able to get a pretty nice wide perspective from the group of people who took the survey. All right. So with that in mind, why don't you just point out a couple of the top findings, and guys, anytime you want to chime in, just let me know, and we'll get you in there. So once again, 1,000 employees, U.S. based, and this is the general findings. We're going to kind of delve deeper into certain categories that kind of got our attention and interest. But the numbers for right now are the overall numbers for everybody who took the survey. And this slide actually sets up one of the things we dig into a little deeper. So one of the questions was, how often do you use Gen AI services? And we asked them, is it daily? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it rarely? Is it never? And the two that really caught our attention, because they're on kind of both sides of opposite sides of the equation. There's almost 1 in 4 people use these tools on a daily basis, but a little more than 1 in 3 actually have never used Gen AI, which to me is kind of surprising. I don't know if you guys want to remark on that. I thought maybe because I'm living in the bubble, but it feels like I was expecting maybe less people to say they've never used it at this point. What about you guys?
I've seen my own usage trend vary. I barely used to use it, say, a few months back. Now I'm using it probably a few times a week. It used to be a few times a month. So my usage certainly has gone up. But I suspect with the 24% using it daily, I suspect that number is going to be much higher if you did the same poll in August, because Google integrated that into their search. So if you're searching something, by default, you're using generative AI without knowing that you're using that. So I think that number would be inching higher. Also, the use cases are becoming more clear. Integrations with third-party applications are getting there. So the maturity of it is slowly increasing. A few months back, we were probably at the peak of the hype cycle. Now that hype is dying down, and it'll slowly build back up with real use cases and real usefulness out there. There obviously you cannot rely on it 100%, but directionally, I find it useful in some contexts. So my own usage has gone up, though I don't use it on a daily basis. How about you guys?
I kind of felt the same way when you talk about like the like peak usage times and kind of troughs. A lot of that is kind of, sometimes it can just be out of sight, out of mind. If I don't have that tab open, my mind does not think like there's an answer there, or I could refine something or use it as more answers. And so the fact that I have to constantly go back to whatever service I'm using and remember to do that, it kind of has to become like a little bit of a habit. So if I go through a habit, it might last for like a week or two, and then sometimes I could just forget about it for a week or two, and I wouldn't feel one way or the other. So I feel like with the Google integration, that helps. The more kind of native those integrations kind of get, where it's closer to like if I'm drafting an email, if that service was like baked into the email itself, I feel like I would probably use that service a little bit more. But if I have to write an email in one place, copy that email content, paste it somewhere else, and then have to prompt it and say, I'm writing an email to a customer that I've talking to, and I have to do this whole like prompt engineering stuff, right? It's kind of annoying in terms of like a workflow. A very smart, like, generative AI integration would be, it knows who I'm drafting an email to. It understands what my relationship is. Is it my manager? Is it someone on my team? Is it my whole team, the customer? And then it can prompt and inject like, the tone and stuff like that. So I find prompt engineering still to be a little bit of a headache every single time, trying to like remind it, who I am, what the target audience is, what kind of tone to use. But when I do use it, yeah, it comes and goes in spurts. But I just find it to be like not deeply integrated in my workflow, probably is the best way to word it. If it was more prevalent in the tools, maybe it might be more usage. I guess the best kind of usage would be that you don't know you're using it at all. That'd be like the ideal scenario where just suggestions and stuff were popped up to you. But I'm sure that's coming soon. I don't think we're too far away from those like more native feeling integrations from a lot of vendors. So it could spike up more.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I think it'll be interesting because as I think Raju, you said, eventually they're going to use it and not know they're using it, so they won't be able to take our survey because they won't know how to answer. I'm just kidding. Now, that's interesting. As we go on, I think that's the case. As of this survey, one of the interesting kind of data points was 30% say they are comfortable sharing their personal data with Gen AI. Service like ChatGPT. So only 30% really of the general survey audience really even feel comfortable with using their data in these Gen AI tools. Is that surprising to you that it's that number?
These are probably the 30% of the people that don't know that the data is already being used without them providing it explicitly in the prompt, I suspect. So, yeah, I think I don't know if I should be surprised or not for this one, but I think the amount of data, particularly when Gen AI is coming from companies who already has your data, you don't have to provide a lot to get a lot out of it. Someone like OpenAI may not have as much data, but other companies do already. So with OpenAI, you have to provide that context, that additional data out there, because they don't have that, at least the ones we know so far. But for the convenience, people will give up privacy, I think, and that will happen every single time. And so maybe I shouldn't be surprised at 30%.
Okay, go ahead, Tejas.
I just think like maybe how sensitive that personal information is would probably vary as well. Are people like uploading bank statements and saying, tell me how much I'm spending on restaurants, every month or something along those lines? Or is it, I don't know, this is my address. Can you find me the best like Asian restaurant nearby that does delivery or something like that, right? Like, I guess levels of how personal certain information is could be different. But yeah, I think generally speaking, people don't really care. I'm not sure today if you're really seeing that much better generative responses if like the token length and stuff and the memory of the service doesn't know exactly who you are in the full context of what's going on. So it knows things, but it might not know a lot about you personally, which will probably come soon again. But for now, I don't think there's that much of a. I don't think you're getting that much better answers because you're sharing your data or you're putting personal stuff in there. People just might not, be aware.
All right, since Raju, you mentioned kind of the convenience factor thing, we did have a question on if you asking these folks to kind of rank the importance when it comes to their technology use of things like data security, convenience, data privacy. Well, you see the list on the screen here. Convenience is definitely much more important to folks than data privacy. And once again, we're asking these folks, they are US based employees, but I think there's a really interesting nuance that was brought out. And I'm going to play this clip from I had an opportunity to speak to Jessica Miller, actually a Zoho customer at Zoholics, and she works in the kind of clinical health field. And I asked her this question. You got to hear her response.
In my work world, it has to be privacy.
Okay.
When it comes to patient data, there's absolutely no compromise for privacy. You can't put convenience above it. You can't put affordability above it. But if I'm being honest, in my personal world, I don't know that I always put privacy at the top. So if I was looking at technology for myself, it's probably a toss-up between convenience and affordability. And I don't think as much about privacy, which I don't know if I will more after this conversation.
Do you think she represents kind of the general thinking when it comes to the where data privacy fits in the list of priorities here?
I don't
I
think
believe so. I believe so. Where people put convenience over, over other things like privacy. And also, if you notice that companies make it easy, they often make it easy so that it's easy for them to collect the data by improving the convenience. And the reverse is true too, where they make it extremely difficult if you want to enable privacy, and if you don't want to share their information, they do all sorts of they play all sorts of tricks to make sure that you do not disable something that may put them in a disadvantage. So in other words, the privacy abuse is the default setting, and that's optimized for convenience, and people will be willing to give up convenience. Like, take something like a browser toolbar. Earlier you used to go to, say, something like google.com to type something, and then you get the results. Now the URL bar is the search bar, where you don't have to go to the search engine, because the URL bar is become the search engine. That's convenience. But by default, you're giving up a lot of information by doing that. So a convenience is given a priority over privacy, because once you do that, every keystroke is tracked and a lot of information is given away without users knowing that they are given away. So I believe people give up privacy in the name of convenience, and vendors and companies that collect the information optimize it for convenience. I mean, Tejas, you had an alternative take.
Yeah, I think, I mean, kind of going to off what Jessica was saying in the video, I feel like generally maybe people in leadership positions at companies probably care a lot more about security and privacy, but a lot of frontline workers probably just don't care. Like, they're just trying to get their job done. And like, every company has like, these like courses you have to go through, or best practices on data and privacy and like, patient data, like she was referring to. But in the real world, someone who's just got a desk job, is like that privacy angle that high their priority, or is kind of just getting their job done easiest and fastest as possible their priority? So that convenience trumps it a lot in kind of just a pure just a work perspective, not anything more than that. Leadership and ownership of a company might feel like more like worried about risk and overall and risk mitigation, so they're going to be a little bit more safer. But no matter how many trainings and courses and flyers and consent things you do for your employees on like following best practices and stuff, at the end of the day, they're going to do what they're going to do to make their job easier. If you ever want to find the easiest way to do something, you just make a lazy person do it, and they'll find the simplest way to get something done. And so I think that goes for case for everybody.
All right, that's some interesting. And if you have any comments or thoughts, please leave them in the comments section, because we love to get your take on these as well. Now, go ahead, Raju.
No, generally in business, the products that do well are the ones that make people lazy.
Yeah, right.
Like the remote control. That's who walks to the TV nowadays to do anything? Nobody, because that. And it's one of the greatest inventions of mankind, if you ask me. All right, so here's one. I don't know if this is a surprise or not, but coming off the convenience over data privacy thing, we asked about has there been an impact in the way that they view data privacy after they've been using these Gen AI tools? And surprisingly, almost 2 out of 3 said there was, with 32% saying they are much more concerned, and another 32% saying somewhat more concerned. It doesn't feel like they're telling the truth. After we went through that last slide, it doesn't feel like they're, at least those things are connecting. Like they're not changing their attitudes or behavior, even if they do say they're more concerned. What do you think these numbers are saying here?
I mean, the context plays a lot of a big role here. I'm I'm concerned about some of these, but in what context? Like I've given it, let's say, a long Wikipedia article in the past, and then I asked questions about it, and I got value out of it. But I also seen people give input a 32-page legal document and ask questions about it, and that certainly is concerning when you have a legal document that you are uploading to a public Gen AI system and asking questions about that document. And that's the reason some of the businesses are extremely concerned about it. If you're a legal firm and if you provide this tool and you don't know one of your employees is using it this way, that should be concerning. And it can be any document for that matter. So there are some contexts where you have to be much more concerned about it, but in other contexts where just if you're just using it for language improvement and all of that, it's less concerning. So the context certainly plays a more important role here.
Yeah, I think also maybe the framing of the question, we could probably ask a couple follow-ups there, but I'm thinking over the past like 10, 15 years, we've seen like a lot of companies basically just collect as much data as possible. Even if you don't really know what to do with it, collect whatever you can, and eventually we'll be able to figure out how to use it. And now with a lot of Gen AI, it's kind of easy to use it. So if you can train it on these models or train the models on your own data sets of customer information, you can get insights and analysis that before might have been more difficult to extract. So let's say previously, I don't know, I'm running some like very basic advertising system, and I would get like, Raju likes oranges and apples. And so I might target him with orange and apple commercials or whatever. But now maybe I know that he likes oranges and apples and maybe adjacent fruits, and I can figure out maybe there's some other aspects of insight I can grab out of those, maybe some kind of orange apple hybrid or some kind of juice or something that was connected. So that like inference model could be a lot better than, straightforward data analysis on like raw data points that was kind of the case before. So I think a lot of times when people think of Gen AI, they might think of just typing in a box and getting an answer, like kind of a chat interface. But what that LLM can do on a data set would be getting an insane more insights into data that companies have already collected. And that's behind the scenes stuff that people probably are just not even aware of. There's no way that that's front of mind for 99% of people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it'll be interesting to see how, maybe we can add a couple of follow-ups into the next one, because it's important to get the context behind just the raw number. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. All right, we got our guys, both of our experts in the green room. So why don't we do one more before we bring them out? And this has to do with how they're actually using training data or training employee data with training AI with them. I'm really tongue-tied this morning. 42% say they work at companies training AI with employee data. Is that a surprise? Is that a number that you thought would be higher or lower? What do you think?
It's on the higher side, but again, it comes down to the next level of detail, what employee data and all of that. So, some data, first, did the employees approve of this? That is the first question that comes to mind. And but I think that number should be. I mean, I expected that number should be lower, because we don't have clarity on it yet. If the adoption of AI in the workplace is not at 40+%, I think this number I expect it to be lower.
Also, some people might not even know if their company is doing it or not. So there's the other angle there too. Yeah, I mean, what company data is extremely important, right? Like if we maybe took, let's say everyone in my company, I wanted to figure out kind of like salaries, who's in band, who's out of band, maybe like who's getting paid too much, different like salary analysis. If I put people's names there, yeah, that looks kind of bad. But if I just put like employee numbers and then I kind of cross-referenced it later on in my own world, that would be like a use of employee data, but kind of anonymized employee data, but maybe not really. And so there could be some usage there, but there's levels to it.
I popped this one up because it's kind of the follow-up. I was actually a little surprised at how positive they viewed their employee data being used to train AI. a little more than a 2-to-1 ratio, positive to negative. It's kind of surprised me in the sense that I don't know, maybe there's some more levels of granularity we can dig into to see what kind of data are they feeling positive about versus what kind they're like, keep your hands off of that. So I'm going to introduce our guest because I think they had an opportunity to see some of the data and some of the results, and they might have a few top of mind thoughts to add to the conversation. So I'm going to bring on both of them, and then we'll have each of them kind of dig in there. So let me bring on Andrew David. Andrew David, how do you pronounce your last name? Because I don't want to butcher it.
Bhagyam. Bhagyam means blessed. Yeah.
I'm just going to call you Blessed Andrew from now on. So there you go.
That's a good one.
Thank you for joining us. And this guy, people call him co-founder of Diginomica, John Reed, expert and all that. I call him the Bro Hammer. So he's going to be the Bro Hammer. John, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks. I think I can live up to that today. I'm coming in hot.
I'm
coming in real hot.
We're going right to the Bro Hammer because when he says stuff like this, I just get out the way. So the floor is yours. Give us your thoughts on what you read and what you've heard and all that.
All right. Well, first of all, kudos on this necessary discussion and valuable data that you surfaced. So big kudos for that. Coming in hot. I'm not coming in hot on you guys. I'm coming in hot on the survey respondents, though. I got some problems with some of your survey respondents, but I want to say I want to double down on one thing, which we can maybe get back to later in the discussion, which Raja made a critically important point, that privacy abuse is the default business model. I think that's incredibly important. I want to add one more, which is that privacy is an illusion. And by that, I mean that people say, oh, well, I favor my privacy over convenience, or I land a little more on this side or the other. Stop it. Unless you're completely off the grid, start with a default assumption that your data is completely exposed and work backwards from there. Let me give you an example of that. Last night, I got a credit alert. My social security number's on the dark web. That's a really big deal for U.S. citizens to have your social security numbers exposed. There's a bunch of social security numbers that just got exposed to these clowns in Florida, a company called National Public Data that don't know how to protect that kind of information. Super clown show, millions of social security numbers exposed. Start there and work backwards. And I'm a victim of identity theft, so I have a lot of experience with this. So anyway, just be aware that your illusion that you're controlling who gets what of your information is totally an illusion. So anyway, let's start there. And then as far as the survey, you also have this other mind-blowing stat. 56% of your daily users say they don't mind sharing personal data with these tools. What is wrong with you people? Seriously, what is wrong with you? You do understand that this becomes part of the training set, and that study after study has shown that the IP can be pulled out of these systems. You do understand that using the kind of prompt engineering techniques that Tejas was referring to earlier. So anyway, but I think one really, really important distinction that I would also make before I throw all the survey respondents totally under the bus is that it really does depend on how you configure these tools. For example, if you take ChatGPT for an example, the default, it puts your stuff in the training set, but you can also change those defaults depending on your subscription level and stuff like that. And then beyond that, on the enterprise level, probably if you talk with your company, and it's very important to talk with them about this, they probably have an enterprise level agreement that protects that from happening. However, there is a difference too, because you could share information with these tools that isn't confidential, but is still IP, and you probably don't want IP in those tools either. And so I think what's really important is just to understand that this provokes a really essential conversation, and I just hope your respondents who said that they're comfortable with that have had a nice long talk with their employers about exactly how that works, because they really need to go enterprise grade with these tools. And one of the things I love talking with Zoho about is this very topic, because you all have been very transparent about how you're incorporating these tools. And that's the conversation I want to have with vendors, which is how are you doing this and how can I use these tools safely and securely? And once you understand that, then I'm good. So I don't know how your respondents totally stand on those issues, so I don't totally want to throw them under the bus, but I'm just a little freaked out by that response because something doesn't seem right there. So anyway.
before we get Andrew's thoughts, Garrett, I'm not going to be able to leave this comment up because I think it'll cover up both John and Andrew's faces so long. Almost. But all Tejas needs to know is he completely agrees with you. So everybody could read the comment. I want to get back to Andrew and get your take on what you got a chance to check out and even what you've heard today.
Yeah, I mean, I was also taken aback by the stats for the first time I went through that. It was indeed a shocker for me because what I thought was people do find generative AI to be productive, but they also sadly find that to be protective. They think it is protective. They think that data is already in good hands. Yes, it does increase our productivity. For example, I use Gen AI myself very quite often, but being a person who's into privacy, there's a lot of caution that goes along with that. That is not something that we take lightly. So I was definitely taken back by the fact that people choose convenience over privacy, but I think there's a sad reality that we have to accept because at the end of the day, people want to get their job done at the cost of something. So probably it is privacy in that case. That is obviously not a good sign, but it's also good to see that there are people who are still thinking along those lines, people who are actually aware, at least for the most part, thinking that privacy is not something that they should take lightly. Some who are privacy, I'll say extremists who have never used Gen AI tools because of privacy requirements. I mean, you remember the discussion that came when along WhatsApp, whether when it merged with Meta and all of those things. But at the end of the day, there are people still using WhatsApp. I still use WhatsApp, for example. So, at the end of the day, convenience becomes a more important facet because most of our work revolves around these tools, and these are easy to use, and the business model is such a manner that you don't really have to pay much for that. All that you have to do is a very small subscription, and it gets your work done. So, to be very honest, I'm still in a state of shock. I mean, reviewing the slides that you put, I'm just lost for words.
And Andrew, to your point, that you don't have to pay for that. What you mean is you don't have to pay for that with money, but there is an abstraction here. You're paying for that with your data, and people are using that data to collect money. Because it is abstracted, people realize that they're not really paying for it. And that is also part of the convenience. So you're slowly giving up your privacy without knowing, but paying for it, but not knowing that you're paying for it.
Yeah, I think that abstraction point, exactly what I was thinking about, but was having a hard time articulating it. The consequences of sharing information is not super clear to people. Like, the reason people feel so comfortable about it is I feel an upside in that convenience is there, but I don't know what the downside is. Like, sure, they have some more data on me, but like, how does that negatively impact me in any way? And whether it's work or personal life, it doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to get things done, and whatever can get it done quicker and easier, as long as especially when you can't see that negative consequence of what the downstream effects would be of sharing information and how that might hurt you either financially or some other way down the line, then it just seems like a win-win. And it just like I guess we're calling or John calls these people kind of crazy, they might call us crazy. Like, what are you being so worked up about? I'm getting all this convenience and work done for me, and there's no real downside. You guys are just like paranoid, like people over here. And
so what I think is crazy is not necessarily sharing personal data, but I suspect, and I could be wrong about this, that most of those folks that responded that way aren't experts in configuring these tools to protect themselves from that, because most of these tools do have settings deep in the bowels of their terms of service and stuff that you can change that protect you from the worst of this. Now, there's always a little bit of a risk, and I was talking with a partner over at IBM about this, because one of the interesting things is how these systems, even if they don't use your data for training, they also do have an ongoing log file, and the log file you need to investigate as well from a corporate perspective in terms of how these log files are being deleted after a certain point. And there's a real sort of audit that needs to happen on the data trail here. But to me, you could defensively share personal information if you configure these tools properly. I just think that those aren't skills that most of us have. We don't have these data and privacy literacy skills. We just start using these tools without even thinking about that. And the companies don't make it easy for us, right? Like they don't say, hey, would you like to, make sure that you don't use, our data for your, for our business model's benefit? Because of course, as Raju alluded to, that's the whole point of the business model. So they're not going to go out of their way to encourage you to configure those things properly. And I hope that enterprise level companies are much more sophisticated around these conversations than I think they are, because then they can go back to their users and say, okay, here's the ground rules, here's what you can and can't do. And I think that's how we progress at this conversation, in my opinion.
And
But
if you're a consumer, do a simple experiment. Put your phone number on a search engine. Do some research about what information about you is available. You'll be surprised at what information you'll find. Every single location you have historically been at, your addresses and all of that is available on the public, including your current address. And to John's point earlier, including your social security number is out there. So with your current address, your zip code, your social security number, what else can you do? What information can you do? From resetting your password to calling whatever. And of course, your frequently used passwords are also publicly available. And that increases the chances of someone's accounts, could be financial accounts, being compromised. Those implications, and some of the systems, interestingly, that are abusing, using this information to abuse and steal information from technical illiterates is increasing, and the complexity of the calls of the abuse calls are increasing as well. And we are still getting started. In other words, the people that are abusing are using AI to create more sophisticated systems.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, I think that's called as the generative AI arms race. Many state actors are trying not to. I mean, they're including it as part of the AI regulatory framework, from what I've seen in the recent past, right from the OECD framework to, I think, the Singapore. The government has come up with some frameworks for regulating AI, especially in workspaces and in general. So they call this term as an AI arms race, basically generative AI arms race, because it's no longer just about weapons, but how AI can completely deceive a person, given the deep fakes and all of the potential technologies and the downfalls that it comes along with. I think it draws comparison to that movie. I'm not sure if you've seen that on Netflix, Black Mirror season 6 episode 1. In case you haven't actually seen that, that's a good example that one should see. Whatever happened in real life, you see that happen. That person is just too shocked because they have never read the terms of service, and that is an AI-based system. It's a quantum-based supercomputer that just takes a person's life altogether and repeats it on TV, all for the world to know. So, and that's the reality that we live in, because most of us don't read those terms. And at the end of the day, we're giving in to something. But yes, definitely, I think the way that the world is progressing and the regulatory landscape is, I'm a little hopeful that they would obviously not be prescriptive on too many things, but there will be some level of guidelines, at least on certain aspects of how to use AI, especially in the government, how to use AI in enterprises, how to use AI at workspaces. Those kind of, at least there will be some legislation, and I think we're set on the path for that.
So just real quick on that point, because it didn't come up yet, is I think you made a huge point there around the regulatory landscape. And I'm looking at Europe the most, because the GDPR set the tone for European mentality around privacy with some pretty strong regulations. And the EU AI Act, I know that's pretty strong. And I know that because companies like Meta are crying about it. So that's a really good sign that there's actually some teeth there. We're threatening to pull out and all this stuff. Like, it's like, okay, you got some teeth. Unfortunately, I don't think California legislation that passes is going to be too strong at this point, but it's a start. But I think this is also really important, is just like, how are we going to do this, and how are we going to protect consumers, and and for enterprises, just being aware of the compliance factor can really change your usage in different regions. And that is something, if I'm a Zoho customer, I want to have a long conversation about that with Zoho in terms of what you're seeing in different countries and what that means.
All right, so we're kind of running short on time, so I'm gonna kind of combine two slides and get your take on what the combination of these two slides mean. So the first one is, according to the folks who took this survey, and this is just at companies with 1,000 employees and up, which made up about 20 some odd percent of the overall. So a pretty good chunk of folks from this group. So 55% said they're allowed to use customer data with GenAI. 49% said employee data. 43% said some kind of company data like processes, strategies, plans, goals. I kind of find it interesting that customer data was more prevalently used in some of the other kinds of data, but that's just me. And then the other thing, I want to jump by this and go to this. All right, so they're using the data in a number of ways, but when it comes to written policies or guidelines, and this is just folks working at 1,000 employees and above kind of companies. Only 33% said there are written policies or guidelines for GenAI tools, for using GenAI tools. 36% for using data and info within those tools. 40% for creating prompts to use with GenAI tools. 28% handwritten have written guidelines for using GenAI created content, and only 17% say they have no written policies whatsoever. Take those two together. They're using the data and kind of the lack of written guidelines and policies for using customer data, employee data, company data. What's your take on all this?
I think we're very, very early in this phase of AI in the workplace. I mean, I liken it to search. The fact that, say, Google is extremely successful in the search world, but that success did not translate to intranet search within the company. These are two different markets. People initially, you'll see some adoption here and there, but once the regulation come in, once people understand the privacy implications, once they understand what information is leaking and all of that, they will tighten the belt a little bit, and there will be systems in place. Again, I'm optimistic on that system in place where these are going to be two separate systems. Public AI is going to be the private AI, and then there is something in the middle that has more control. Apple is doing something like that. They're calling it, I think, private cloud or something like that, where a lot of it is happening on your device. For external data, there is a controlled environment with policies that are in place that will pull in the public data and then be helpful there. I assume that's where we are headed down in coming years. For now, it's a wild west, and it's a matter of time before some of these regulations and all some of these controls are in place. We are still in phase one of Gen AI usage.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good that only 17% had no policies. That's, I mean, lower than I expected. I thought, probably 50% would have nothing in place officially. So a sign of something good.
Wow, we got a positive from Tejas?
A little bit.
All right, so one last thing, and I guess we'll wrap it up. I found this kind of interesting. So, and this is going back to the overall general survey population. So they found that they're twice more likely to see AI's role as helpful than not. Twice times more believing AI trained with employee data will benefit them than not. And a majority are receiving a positive impact on their job from AI. But 72% see AI as either a threat to their job or a necessary evil. And then on top of that, 3 out of 4 want some sort of government regulation for using their data, employee data, and also for regulating IP rights for content created. What are those two kind of data points tell you guys where we're at with this?
I thought the previous one on what was it, 45 or 46% a threat to their job. I would say realistically, probably that number should be higher, depending on what their roles are. We could probably split that down based on people who are in like sales and marketing or other roles. Maybe that percent goes higher or lower based on that. But ultimately, I think the necessary evil is the most important thing. I wouldn't really call it evil, but it will unlock productivity, and it does, make parts of jobs and and work easier. So it is beneficial, but it's just leveraging it properly and understanding where the tool stops and where the human kind of begins is probably the most important thing for probably anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I totally resonate with that, and that reminds me of this this post that I saw on X that reads like, I'm sure all of you have gone through that. It says, "I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, and not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes." Right. So we want to stay creative. We want AI to help us to be a productive medium, something that helps us along the way. For example, recent work that I did was I need to write some code for parsing certain documents and rendering into different format. I obviously don't code these days, but I'll have to depend on other teams to actually do that. But thanks to ChatGPT, for example, I just told this is how the document would look like. I didn't give any other actual input. I just told this is how it looked like, and this is what I'm expecting. It just gave me a simple Python code, and I could just run it on, let's say, Google Colab or something. It gave me the output I desired, something that's very simple, which would actually take me at least 2 or 3 days and a lot of dependencies to do. So it actually makes us more productive. And I think it's a necessary evil in that case. It's obviously not a threat to our job. If you see it as a threat, it would be a threat. But if you see it as an opportunity or a milestone that we should reach, or a way to incorporate that, like how computers became a part of our everyday lives. We were thinking computers will replace people, but that was not the case. That's the case with AI too. It will help people, but if we let it beyond a certain point, if we are too careless, I think the fault is coming back to humans.
Brent, can I make a closing comment?
Yes, the floor is yours, Brohammer, sir.
Okay, closing comment. What an awesome discussion. Thank you for inviting me. I loved listening into the first part too. You guys did a great job. That number, that 46%, like so this whole thing around that laundry quote, I love that quote too, around preserving creativity. The fact of the matter is that doing things like laundry and dishes is actually very, very difficult. And robotics hasn't solved that on the home front. And that's one of the reasons why we've picked on things like creative generation, because it's actually easier to do this with language than it is with physical movement. But that 46% of people that feel threatened, I think in terms of actually how good the AI is, AI doesn't really do jobs for the most part. It does tasks. I would say more accurate, it's more like 10% are threatened by the current AI, but I'll bump it back up to 46% because a lot of employers are going to overreach and reduce headcount in really inappropriate ways. We see it all the time with customer service, right? You can't find a real person anymore, even though you need one. So a lot of companies are going to do what I call overreach, and they're going to extend these tools beyond what they're capable of. And so I do think people should be threatened. So my message to employers is put out a life-affirming message about how technology like AI is going to help your people, and that you're not about firing people, but helping them do their jobs better and be more creative, like Andrew was saying. Put that out there. And also don't wait for regulations. Put out guidelines that, to Raj's point, free people up to feel safe using these tools so they can do it to do their jobs better. And let's get on that. I mean, I think the numbers were pretty good. And my final, but there's just more work to be done there. And my final comment is, I was listening to a podcast about Signal the other day, because Signal is a totally encrypted messaging app. And it was so refreshing to hear a business model that explicitly said, we differentiate on privacy. We don't gather your data. We don't want to gather your data, and we're not doing AI. But we also need a middle ground of companies that want to respect privacy, but also help with AI and help people do their jobs better. And so that's why I'm really going to be watching companies like Apple and Zoho the most, because you guys are the kind of companies that are going to try to do this in the right way, but also give users access to these powerful tools. And so I'm really going to be watching that middle ground of companies, because let's face it, how many companies can be like Signal and differentiate on privacy completely and not do any AI? Like, not very many. So let's look for that middle ground of companies that really help people do their jobs better.
All right, that's great. Any parting words from Raju or Tejas?
No, I think this. I'm more optimistic. Today, unfortunately, protecting privacy doesn't pay. That has to, that has to be reversed, where there is an incentive structure that has to be aligned so that privacy becomes important for the user. I think, and we have to show it in action that you can protect privacy and offer good products, and people are willing to, reward you for that. I think that is a model that I'm looking forward to. I'm optimistic on that front.
Yeah, and I also think just over time, the general populace will become more educated on the topic, privacy implications, how LLMs work, what the trade-offs are. These kinds of things will just become a little bit more mainstream thought. If we circle back maybe 10 years ago, thinking about like Facebook or Google, I don't think ads and like privacy was like such a concern, even though nothing's changed. They've, I mean, just expanded their data collection, but for the most part, the core concepts are there. But it was over time that it became a much more like front of mind kind of an issue, and people understood what the trade-offs were more clearly. So I feel like over time too, this will pick up through more content creation and just general education of the public. They'll probably get a better sense of how to protect themselves better and do the configurations and stuff that John had mentioned earlier as well.
Wow, I can't believe the time flew that fast because this conversation was nonstop. I appreciate everybody's input, thoughts. I thought it was great. What I'll look forward to is seeing how these things change over time, seeing how with more experience with Gen AI and more opportunities to experience what it has to offer and how it's being used. How does that change how we view data privacy and generally how we view AI? So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to rolling out this survey in different parts of the world and seeing how it's viewed over here versus over there, because I think there's a lot of interesting insights that can be gathered as we kind of go through this exercise. So I really appreciate that. And one last thing, this conversation really doesn't end today, because tomorrow I'm going to be speaking with a whole bunch of small business experts about the results of the survey and just kind of the broader question of, does small business really care about AI and data privacy? I'm hoping we'll find something out tomorrow. So I look forward to that. I also just thank everybody for taking time to do this. There'll be lots of great clips coming out of this. There's a lot of great information. So thanks to the questions that came in the comments from the folks as well. So I think we'll try to be back on track a little bit towards the end of the year with the watching privacy, because as we all know, it never ends. There's always somebody out there doing something to our privacy. We're the ones that have to stay on top of this. All right. So thanks, everybody. And I will not see you later today for CRM Players. We're on hiatus. So thanks. And I will see you tomorrow for Small Business Trends.